Hi everyone, welcome. I'm down here in my wormery, and if it's true that a picture tells 1,000 words, then the picture you see here in front of you probably tells you a number of things already. Like, for example, which bin we're feeding today. This bin looks like no other system. Of all my worm systems, this is not even a bin, it's a bag. This is my, what used to be called the Outdoor Worm Bag version 4.0. At this point, I'm just calling it Worm Bag version 4.0 because it's no longer an outdoor system. It's now an indoor system for the past a little bit over a month now. And now what else does this picture tell you? Number two, what are the worms being fed? I think that's pretty obvious at this point, right? They're getting a pumpkin. A little pumpkin, one of a bunch of pumpkins that I was able to salvage off the curb. Stuff that was put out by a household so that the trash man could pick it up. This was a couple weeks after the Halloween season had ended, and rather than leaving it there so the trash man could haul it away, I grabbed them all and I threw them in the back of my vehicle. And over time I've been amassing a collection of some stuff, and once again the picture should be telling you what I'm talking about. I've been amassing a collection of pumpkin seeds, quite a number of them. These were the ones that came out of the most recently carved open pumpkin that I used for another project. These have been sitting around for a while. And now I'm going to have even more once I carve this little guy open and pull the seeds out. And I've also got a little side project going on here. I got to build some bait boxes for another little something that's going on separate from this. So I'm going to use a little bit of this pumpkin for that purpose, but the majority of it's going to go to feeding these little guys. And well, in case the picture doesn't fill in all the blanks completely, I have some words too, as well as some numbers. So some of the stuff we already talked about is the name of the system. Obviously, this is Worm Bag version 4.0, previously an outdoor system. It's now 301 days of age. Yeah, we kind of forgot to check in on it yesterday. I was really busy with something else, something that even still has some loose ends. That's why I'm building bait boxes. If you want to see that video, I can link to it up here in the corner for you. But that's a totally separate topic. Back to the worm bag, 301 days of age. We do have a round number, though, that correlates to that, which is 43 weeks of age today. And it was bought in, like I mentioned earlier, a little bit over a month ago, 33 days now. It's been in here. And over its lifetime, over those 301 days, it's been fed 23 times. And the last time we checked in on it, it was 12 days ago. And we had done a whole bunch of maintenance on the system. We had put in a bunch of, well, this is two layers. There's two layers of fabric here, one bag nested within the other. We were getting worried that the system might be losing a lot of its moisture to evaporation, so we placed plastic bags in between those two layers. We did a whole bunch of rearrangement of this stuff. We collected up all the foods, all the bedding, and we included them in the feeding last time. And the feeding consisted of pumpkin then too, but frozen pumpkin and frozen watermelon as well. So I'll be curious to see how they're doing on that. So I'm going to take care of carving up this pumpkin, prepping it to be fed to the worms today. And then when we return, we'll pick up where we left off. And I'll already have the camera in the proper position for that. So I'll be back in a couple minutes. I'll see you then. There she is. Nice job, right? Pretty much I think I got every seed out. And I went ahead and I already used that donated piece of material to set up the bait boxes for that other project, but that's not what we're here to do. We're here to feed these little guys. Now, something we decided to do recently was to not include bedding with our feedings, just food only, because one thing that the system is in high supply of, surplus, if you will, is plenty a great deal of bedding everywhere. I mean, there's leaves, there's weeds, there's other things, paper maybe even, different things that we use as bedding over the course of time in this system, which we actually made a little effort last time to try to collect up. So we had a pile of the collected bedding that we encountered as we inspected the system, and then in addition to that, we had another little pile of all the collected food bits that we encountered along the way when we were inspecting the system. And I guess our main reason for wanting to inspect the system was just to make sure there's no risk of the system becoming dangerously dry on the outer edges. And I mean, right over here, for example, I'm already spotting a couple worms right there on the very edge of the system. So right here's a worm that's not put off by the fact that it might be a little bit dry on the edge. Here's another one. And yet another one. So I'm not too worried. I guess that's kind of what I was looking for, some sort of an affirmation that the system's in fact capable of hanging on to its moisture content with those newly installed plastic vapor barrier shields that we put in last time. So that's a good thing. But I still see no harm in sort of just kind of doing one quick loop around the outer edge just to see how things are in general, if for no other reason, maybe to pick up a few extra pieces of food that we didn't collect up last time. Like I see here, 2 pieces of corn cob and the shell of an avocado. It's amazing that you can still identify some of that stuff. I guess it's not such a miracle that you can identify a piece of corn cob, because that's got a pretty, distinct sort of shape and structure to it. Pretty obvious when you run into it. And I just figured we'd do a little bit of what we did last time. We'd try to collect up some of the old foods from out within the bedding material, possibly leaving what's on the outer edge to be more and more just sort of castings only, Maybe we can even pick up some of this bedding material. In fact, maybe that would be a good thing to stuff this thing with, because I wanted to sort of submerge this perhaps just under the surface with this opening up top so that the worms would have to kind of happen upon it. I don't know if that's just going to prevent them from going into it and eating it. I'm almost wondering if we stuff it and we put it in this way, maybe that would be the better bet. Then we can even leave part of it sticking out on the surface. Then the worms can come in from below. I don't know, I'm going to chew on that for a moment and then figure out how we're going to give it to the worms so that they can chew on it. So let's just do this. Let's go for a quick lap around the system, then we can excavate the middle, see how they're doing with that last feeding they got. I don't know, frozen pumpkin, frozen watermelon. Just seems to me like a feeding that after 12 days would leave very little, if any, leftovers. But we'll see when we get there. Since that was placed down the middle, we'll encounter that at the end when we open up the space to put today's feeding in. And I guess I should be careful not to go too overboard, because we don't need too much stuff. I mean, I think we've already got enough here to stuff that little puny pumpkin full. I guess if we end up with more stuff than we need, we can just kind of throw it into the hole beneath the pumpkin. But we've already made it almost all the way around, so we're almost done inspecting the outer edge. I guess other than that shell of the avocado and those few pieces of pumpkin stem, corn cob, I don't think we've encountered any other food bits. We were pretty thorough last time, though. We did attempt to scrounge up as much leftover food and bedding as we could find. This, I believe, is another piece of corn cob. I just broke it. No big deal. Here's another piece of shell. I wonder, did I just drop these? Avocado, shell, corn cob. Those were the sort of things we collected in the beginning. And oddly enough, right here, this one spot feels to me a little bit drier than the rest. So I just wonder if that might be right in one of those spots where perhaps I didn't install a piece of plastic in between. All I really did was I just took a few plastic bags and I pulled the 2 bags apart from each other, the 2 grow bags that the worms live in, and I just inserted those plastic bags in between. So nothing fancy as far as putting that vapor barrier up. So this to me looks like a piece of, I guess it's just casting stuff together. But these 2 things are corn cob as well. And this one has not even been shattered yet. This is going all the way around still, and it's got some good length to it. But I think we've pretty much, oh, look at this, even a peanut shell, which in my experience takes pretty much forever in a worm bin to break down. So that's one of those things I really don't mind helping along by busting it up a bit. So, all right, good little inspection of the outer edge. I saw worms everywhere we went, so I think my concerns of this system possibly becoming a little bit overly dry are kind of dispelled, so I'm not worried now. And here, since this is food itself, it doesn't seem all that important for the food bits, that we're putting in, but I think the rest of the stuff is valuable from the point of view that it's bedding and going to give the worm something to travel through. So I'm going to do my best to try to jam this thing so that it can become a medium through which the worms can travel to get into the pumpkin and access all parts of its inner surface and hopefully start nibbling away on it for us. Now, how long something this size is going to take, and the fact that it hasn't been prepped for worm consumption by first being frozen kind of makes me wonder if, we might come back in here in another 10 or 12 days and find that very little of it's been eaten. I don't know. I'm not sure what to expect with this thing, but it should be interesting to see. There's another piece of corn cob. I don't know. Just seemed like an interesting idea to throw some leftover food bits into the little mini pumpkin. And I believe I am starting to lean towards the idea of placing this thing in with this access point, the open access point downwards, giving them pretty much unobstructed access to the inside from below, instead of them having to kind of come at it from above and possibly not even sensing that this is a yummy piece of food. I think by facing it downwards, it'll make it a lot more interesting for the little wormies. Now, the one thing I'm concerned about in my worm bins in here is that I've been seeing flying insects. So something I've been doing in all of my systems for about a week now, every time I check in on one of my systems, I treat it with a little bit of that mosquito dunk solution, which luckily also is pretty effective on controlling fruit flies. So I think before we go much further, I want to take care of that. I got my little bottle behind me, and the reason that actually occurred to me was that I thought it might be a good idea to also add a little bit of moisture to this thing by just, the problem with this little thing is that the pump doesn't want to reset. Sometimes I put a little bit of cooking oil into the pump mechanism, because eventually over time it starts to get a little bit sluggish on the reset. Another thing that I do sometimes is I just squeeze the bottle. Seems like we got a little leak somewhere. Oh well. There was a point in time when I was able to do that. I just squeezed it and then the liquid came flying out. But it also seems like just by doing that, maybe we dislodged whatever schmutz was interfering with the movement of the little piston over there, or cylinder, or whatever it is, plunger. What do you call it? I don't even know. I'm sure one of those is probably the right word for it. So yeah, I just wanted to get this BTI or mosquito dunk solution loaded in here so that if any wise guy little flying insects decide they want to try to make their home in here and lay some eggs, then, well, they can try, but whatever comes out of their little eggs, the little fruit fly larva, will be unable to develop into that next generation. That's how this stuff works. It interferes with the development of the next generation. So it's not poison. It's just something that interferes with their metabolism or their development or growth or whatever it is you want to call it. Their biology, basically. So I don't know if that's enough moisture. I think it is, but I also think it's probably sufficient as far as a suitable amount of BTI. And now we also got a whole bunch of leftover other foods here that were placed down into the middle. And here too we're going to find leftover stuff like an avocado pit, whatever this thing is. Whatever it is, the worm's right inside of it. It almost seems like a nut, some sort of a nut. Oh, you know what it is? It's unusual because it's not round anymore. It's kind of oval. So maybe as it sort of collapses and starts to deteriorate, it too is a avocado pit. So here too, I don't want to excavate all the food items out of this feeding area. I'm really just mostly interested in checking out how the last feeding goes, or went at this point. This might be a little piece of watermelon rind, but I don't think we're going to find much else. I mean, I would be really surprised if we bumped into a huge chunk of pumpkin down here. All that stuff, having been frozen before we put it in here, would have just became mush upon thawing and becoming just something very, very easy for the worms to dig right into and gobble up. And then, like, you know, other than the frozen food items that we collected and placed down in here, there was also a whole bunch of collected up bedding material that we collected and placed down in under the foods. So that's what we're already starting to stumble on now. And I guess from a worm's point of view, bedding is interesting until it becomes food. So that's kind of the way bedding doubles, is not only a place for them to hang out and live in, but also something to nibble on once it's ready for that stage to proceed. And I think we're pretty much done here. I've created, I think, a deep enough hole here so that we can drop in our little feeding for today, sort of like this. My idea was to even leave some of it, sticking out above the surface, so that when we come back, we'll be greeted by this interesting little food item from the last time we were in here. So I'll backfill to a certain degree, but we're not going to submerge the little pumpkin. I got a feeling the way we set it up, it should be adequately prepared so that they can, in fact, you know, cruise right up into it and start nibbling on it. I just don't know what to expect if we were to return to this thing in 12 days again and check in on it. Would that little pumpkin be very heavily, you know, eaten, or would only a little bit of it be eaten? I'm not quite sure. So that's a pretty interesting feeding. It kind of makes me feel like once we put that plywood covering on the top of this thing, it's going to sort of teeter. So maybe I can create a little berm around the edge so that it doesn't have to teeter. I do kind of like the idea of any moisture down in here, moisture coming off this food, not being able to escape out the edges either. I kind of like the idea of it becoming a kind of a little bit of a humidity zone down here around the food so that the worms really enjoy it and come out for it. Oh, I think it's time to replace this glove. I've been using it with a little hole on the tip of it for a number of videos now, but I've finally trashed it, so it's going in the garbage. All right, that's our feeding of our now 301-day-old worm bag version 4.0. No longer an outdoor system, now just getting acclimated to being an indoor system along with the rest of my worm bins, plus one worm bag. But that's the end of the video, everyone. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, as always, please don't forget to leave me a quick thumbs up before you go. That's always very much appreciated. And if you haven't done so already, please also consider subscribing to the channel. That's also very much appreciated. Alright, everyone, have a great day. Thanks for watching. Bye now.